Two Chairs No Waiting, episode number 128, Rural Character and Values. Episode number 128 of Two Chairs No Waiting is brought to you by Weaver's Department Store at weaversdepartmentstore.com. Drop by over at Weaver's and pick up some of your favorite Mayberry things. There's all kinds of stuff there. Go over there and just browse around. I'm sure you're going to find something you'll love. Two Chairs No Waiting is also brought to you by donations from listeners like you. Executive producer for Two Chairs No Waiting, episode number 128, is Jay Hicks. Jay, I really appreciate your support. Thanks a lot. Hello, everybody. I'm Allan Newsome, your host for Two Chairs No Waiting. I am so excited to have you back again this week to just spend a little bit of time here in Mayberry with me. I really do appreciate you taking your time to do that. So what we're going to be talking tonight, we're going to go back and continue our visit to the George Lindsey Film Festival that we kind of started last week when we listened to Tim Hollis, his comments. And this episode, we're going to be, again, it's on Southern rural humor and TV and film. And this week we'll be hearing my remarks that were said at the George Lindsey Film Festival. So you'll get to hear me. Wow. You get to tune into the podcast and listen to a recording of me talking somewhere else. But this was in front of a live panel. There was four of us there. There was Tim Hollis, the author from Birmingham that we talked with last week. Actor Danny Vinson, he's from over in Russellville, Alabama, and he's been in several movies and films. And there's the phone ringing. You may not hear it, but then we also had Dr. Jacob Podber. And he is a professor, and he talked about just rural portrayals of rural people, and the comments were and they weren't negative, but the portrayals of a lot of Southern and rural people, not just Southern, were somewhat negative. So when it came my turn, I wanted to try my best to turn it into a positive spin. So what you're going to hear first is you're going to hear the moderator of the evening kind of setting up the comments that are coming, and then you'll hear from me, and Danny Vinson asks the question. So some of the voices you'll hear at one point is George Lindsey Jr. asking a question toward the end. When he asked about Howard Morris, I believe, directing episodes. So anyway, I won't talk anymore now because I'm fixing to be talking from the film festival. So here it is, and I really hope you enjoy it.
That whole notion that the humor and the culture gets accepted, and go back to the Griffith Show, because when you think about the mix of sitcoms, certainly the Beverly Hillbillies had life in reruns. Green Acres did as well. Petticoat Junction, maybe less or so, but of that mix, it's been the Griffith Show that's had the longest shelf life. And in the TV business, my colleague, Dr. Janet McMullen, is here. We would call it an evergreen in the sense that this is a TV show that people can watch over and over and over again. And again, you think about the Griffith Show episodes that are almost 50 years old now. The early ones, not quite. But how many episodes did they do, Allan?
There were 249 total, and it is 50 years ago. 50 years ago in October, actually, is when the premiere was. And since this is the George Lindsey Film Festival, I did want to, I'm glad we're able to talk about the Andy Griffith Show because it's just been such a part of my life, and I expect several of you probably watch it as well. Anybody watch it out there? You're Southerners, most of us, I believe.
I'm a better parent, by the way, from having watched Andy.
Amen. Better parent. That's right. So, we're Southerners, and when you watch the Andy Griffith Show, I believe most of us, I grew up in a small Southern town. It wasn't as big as Mayberry, but it was like the county seat. The county seat was that big. And how many people here grew up with somebody that reminds you of people from the Andy Griffith Show? Yeah. Ladies at church, maybe, that were just like Clara or just like Aunt B. And boy, there's a lot of Ernest T. Basses around. I know that. So, but I believe that's the realism you got from the Andy Griffith Show. We've talked about some of the bad stereotypes of rural comedies in that time frame, but the Andy Griffith Show stands out in my mind, and maybe I'm biased, I am, but it stands out as a really a positive example of Southern culture. And I believe in a large degree that's because of Andy. Andy was very active in the script writing. They would go through the scripts as set around at a round table there, and Andy would change things if it just didn't sound right. This is not right. Kind of what you're talking about, the same thing. He would change things to make them sound like it would in North Carolina. Those kind of things were there. And the moral values, we talked about that. Everybody know about the Andy Griffith Show Bible study? You know there is one? Doesn't that tell you that a 50-year-old show still inspires people in some way to do Bible studies? Well, that was never the intent. But doesn't it tell you about the characters of that show and the moral values that they had? That you use Andy as an example of this is how a Christian should behave, and Barney is more than usually the way you should not behave. And so you're watching Andy try to help Barney, and you see that love relationship between the characters. Andy, I've heard George Lindsey say many times that it was always, the joke was you couldn't laugh at the character. You had to laugh with the characters, or because you weren't doing any joke on the show or any conflict that would damage that person. Because if you're friends with somebody, you might joke around, have fun, and laugh about that friend, but you still protect them. And I believe that's, when you watch the Andy Griffith Show, you really see that. And I believe that's a Southern thing, and I'm proud of that. I'm proud that we're from the South. I'm proud that we look out for each other and that we try to love. Even Otis, bless his heart, was drunk and came in there every week. But what did they try to do? They tried to reach out to him. They tried to help him. I mean, they got him doing his, what was that called? The artwork he did, the little mosaics. Yeah, he did the mosaics. They tried to get him to quit drinking. Aunt B was, oh, Otis, you didn't do it again. Yeah, I seen temptation coming, but it seen me first, or whatever that quote is exactly. There's just so many examples of that you see, and that is really what we're about, I believe, as Southern people. And I think, that's one of the reasons, if you watch the show, we're talking about characters that were somewhat over the top. Ernest T. Bass. Everybody loves Ernest T. Does everybody know that he was only in 5 episodes of the Andy Griffith Show? He was on for 8 years, and he's in 5 episodes. And you tell people that, and they go, what? Are you kidding? That's one of my favorite characters. But Ernest T's only in 5 episodes. Ernest T was a wild man. And had he been on the show, it would have been kind of like Fonzie on Happy Days, where he just took it over. He would have taken the character, and it would have just been all about Ernest T and the craziness.
Where was Howard Morris from?
That's a great point. Howard Morris, Ernest T. Bass, was from Brooklyn. He's from New York. He's a New York guy. He's a Jewish guy from New York.
Didn't he direct some episodes?
He sure did. Ernest T. Howard Morris directed several episodes of the Andy Griffith Show and did a lot of other things as well. He's on your shows with Sid Caesar.
He did a lot of cartoon voices.
Oh, Hanna-Barbera cartoon voices.
I was going to say he was Mush Mouse in their Hillbilly series.
Yeah.
So he got a lot of mileage out of that hillbilly voice.
Oh, he did. And we've talked about I run a mailing list about the Andy Griffith Show. I do a podcast about the Andy Griffith Show, so I'm really deep on this. But talking about radio and how it impacted. Well, radio, we don't know how it exactly impacted the Andy Griffith Show itself. But you may have, I don't know if you ever listened to old time radio, but there's a show called The Great Gildersleeve. Great show, great characters. That show, the characters, it's very Mayberry-like in the way those characters are portrayed. And just so happens that the barber on that show, his name's Floyd Munson. His name's Floyd, the barber. Mm-hmm. And I was listening to this recently, and guess what his brother's name is? Otis. So you wonder, when I was listening to that, I tried everything I could to find out, wow, did the same writers write some of these shows or not? I couldn't find any evidence, but I've got to believe, because of the time frame that Great Gildersleeve was on, Andy Griffith as a boy may have been sitting around a radio with a candle, maybe, sitting around listening to those shows, and that impacted his mind, what characters really were about.
There was another connection like that I've heard 2 different versions of the story, but the fact is that in the late 40s, Lum and Abner had a character on their program, and the fellow's real name was Opie Cates. He was a band leader. He was a clarinet player. And the story is that either Andy Griffith or someone else remembered Opie Cates and decided that was a funny name.
That's right. And
because how many Opies have you heard?
Opie, that is.
Of course,
where it came
there was a writer named Opie Reed in Arkansas who did the rural humor back in the days before radio.
Yeah,
so.
Andy's talked about it being Opie Cates.
Yeah.
That was where it came from. And there's so many things, too, on the Andy Griffith Show to make it real. So many of the characters' names came from the area where Andy grew up. Emmett, the Emmett's Fix-It Shop. Emmett Forrest is Andy's childhood friend, still friends with him, and created the Andy Griffith Museum that's in Mount Airy, North Carolina now. There's towns all around there. Matter of fact, Mayberry, the name of it, there's a Mayberry, Virginia, about 18 miles from Mount Airy, North Carolina, up on the Blue Ridge Parkway. That's probably where the name came from because Andy's mother was from up in that area, Mayberry, Virginia. There's Crumpville or something like that, town nearby. If you go and look at a North Carolina map around Mount Airy, you'll see a lot of names that sure will remind you of stuff on the Andy Griffith Show. And so Andy, to make that realism there and to make it really feel like a real southern town, he put those things in there. And Andy was from North Carolina. Don Knotts was from Virginia. Jim Neighbors and George are both from here in Alabama. And, Aunt Bee, she's actually from New York, I believe, is where she's actually from. But, those characters, they just added that realism of what it was really like, I think, here in the South.
Alan, didn't Frances Bouvier, once the series was over, didn't she move back to North Carolina?
She moved to Siler City, North Carolina. Yeah, she retired there.
And she's buried there.
That's right. She retired to Siler City and lives there. So I think we've got a lot to be proud of as Southerners. If the example that's on the Andy Griffith Show, even the Beverly Hillbillies, like we said, those people were the ones you're sympathetic for because they're trying to do what's right instead of what's wrong, which is what everybody else is out to just make money or whatever. And Jed was trying to give it away all the time. I think that value, if we're going to be portrayed as Southerners, I don't mind. That's fine. If they want to think we're dumb, good. Maybe they won't come down here and leave us alone. Living in Huntsville, obviously there's a lot of people that move there now. We've got a lot of military stuff that's happened. So there's a lot of people from outside the area have moved there. But why are they moving there? Because they really like it. They don't want to go home. We have people where I work that are military people, and they come there for their 2-year term toward the end of their career, and then they keep trying to get it extended so they can retire in Huntsville, Alabama, and in the area. And that says a lot for that. And while there was examples, obviously there are examples of the Southerners being portrayed poorly, I think we can look for positive examples just as well, because I guarantee you there's a lot of examples of Brooklyn people being portrayed poorly. It's not just a Southern thing, and there's definitely, in my mind, maybe they think it's okay, but California people are portrayed poorly in a lot of things I see. They may think that's normal, but when you see those things, I think we've got a lot to be proud of as Southerners, and the Andy Griffith Show is a great example. George Lindsey, like you said, he's talked about not the sharpest knife in the drawer, and he's also told the story. He asked Andy one time, said, what kind of guy is this Goober guy? What is it? And Andy said, well, he's the kind of guy that'll go into a restaurant and say, man, they've got good salt here. So that's the kind of people I think we want to be around. We want to be around positive people, things that, it's nice watching Andy Griffith Show because troubles are over in 30 minutes and everything's resolved. But those characters are what we love. Because even if I don't watch the show every day, it'll be on in the other room, and I'll be sitting there working on my computer doing something, and I hear what's going on. And there'll be times where I just slide the chair back so I can see around the corner so I can watch how Barney's going to react to something. I've seen it 50 times, 100 times, I don't know. But it's funny because of the character. And I believe that's the real secret. And that's what I think you're doing on your characters. It's the character. It's not a joke. It's a character. And I think that's why it's so enjoyable.
When I stand, it's just a signal.
All right. Well, that was basically my segment there at the George Lindsey UNA Film Festival. my portion of the panel discussion, and I hope you enjoyed that. And I've mentioned that there was a lot of discussion about negative portrayal of Southern characters or rural characters before my segment started. And I don't want you to think it was really a negative atmosphere, but I did want to try to turn it around and just talk about how proud I am to be associated with the Andy Griffith Show. I mentioned being Southern. Of course, I was playing to my audience. It was it was in Florence, Alabama, where the film festival was held. So, of course, everyone there was pretty much from the South. So, and when I say South, I'm really just talking about people with the same values that you see on the Andy Griffith Show. Because I know a lot of the people that listen to this podcast, they're not from the South, but you got the same values that you see portrayed on that show. And that was one of the things Tim had talked about last week was, that the original rural comedies were not necessarily Southern. They were in New England and other places. And then Lum and Abner, they were in Arkansas, which is in the South. But, I mean, there were characters before that weren't. So, anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. It was a lot of fun to get to be a part of that. I wish I had the first two segments. As I had mentioned, I was sitting on the side of the table where Tim and I were over on one side of a table, and the other two, Danny and the professor, were on the other side of the table. So the recorder could not pick them up very well. But Danny was very, what he had been talking about was playing a Southern rural person in movies and in TV, and how difficult that can be at times because you get very typecast. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed that. We've got now we're going to move on. We got a caller. I had a caller call in, so we're going to hear from Tom real quick. So here we go. Here's Tom.
Allan, this is Tom from the Penny Pinching Barney chapter in Lincoln, Illinois. I'm the president. And I want to let you know how much I have thoroughly enjoyed this Two Chairs No Waiting. This brings us Mayberry fanatics. You hit so many areas concerning the show that it is such a blessing to us. Like I said, us Mayberry fanatics that just love every aspect of it, and you're doing a wonderful job, and we're looking forward to being at Mayberry this coming summer. So keep up with the good work, and also I'm going to contact you right after this here again and find out how I can donate to the show. Bye.
All right. Well, man, I really appreciate that, Tom. Thanks for calling in, and I'm glad you're enjoying the show. This is, look, I do this for all of us. We're all big fans of the Andy Griffith Show. And, if you're not enjoying the content of our podcast, then, I'm doing something wrong. So I really do appreciate that so many people have been willing to help donate to the keeping the program going. And because there's a lot of expenses, believe it or not, putting this on. Over the years, I bought new microphones and new cameras and new recording equipment and all kinds of stuff. And not only that, but the monthly fees that it takes to be able to host everything. So I really do appreciate those of you that have helped donate. And if you would like to donate to the show, you can go to the Two Chairs No Waiting website, and if you scroll down just a little bit, there's a donate button right there, and you can donate whatever you'd like to. And that's how you become an executive producer or a co-producer, depending on how much you donated. But if you'd like to do that, I'm always grateful. It's like Christmas to me when I get an email from PayPal telling me that somebody's donated. I'm like, oh, all right. And I will write you back and thank you and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, folks, I hope you've enjoyed the show. I'm going to make it a little shorter. I'm going to keep it under 20 minutes this week. That's great. And I want to invite you to call in just like Tom did. You can call me at 888-684-8415. You can email me at floyd@imayberry.com. You can also go over to twochairsnowaiting.com and leave messages there right on the website. You just go below the actual post, and there's a place there for comments, and you can click a comment, and you can go in and leave your own comments to me right there. It's real easy to do. You can also go over to facebook.com/2chairs. There's all kinds of ways to get in touch with me, and I love to hear from you, and I do my best to respond back. So, folks, that's all we've got this week, I do believe, and I want to thank you so much for just being part of the show and being here with me. And we'll see you guys next week on Two Chairs No Waiting, your Mayberry podcast. Bye, guys.